Thank you so much. There we go. Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. My name is Janie. I'm just going to share my presentation and then I'll be right back with you in just a second. Um, all right. So today, we are here to talk all about supporting youth in their sexual development, specifically youth with diverse abilities. And I'm going to touch a bit on why I use that word in a minute. But again, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Janie. I work in sexual reproductive health, as a health promotion facilitator, but my real bread and butter is education. Um, and so I want to let you know a little bit about our services before I get into the content of this presentation. Like I said, I work in sexual reproductive health through Primary Care Alberta. We have four clinical sites in the four quadrants of Calgary, southeast, northeast, southwest, northwest. And we offer sexual and reproductive health services totally free, totally confidential. And then my team, which is the education part of our SRH or sexual reproductive health services, I'm part of the ed team. And the education team, we offer sexuality education and information and professional development to a wide range of groups. And we can also offer one-on-one consultations for individuals seeking support professionally or for parents and whatnot. So if you're interested in learning more about those services, I've included this email here at the bottom of this first slide that you can reach out to learn more. I have a lot of experience working with youth, um, specifically youth with these diverse abilities, working with both the youth themselves and parents and providers. I know that some of you are here as parents and carers, others are here as providers in a professional role, because we know it truly takes a village to support children and teens to have healthy relationships and healthy sexual development. So, with that, let's begin. So a land acknowledgement was offered. I also want to acknowledge that I am situated here on Calgary in Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional home to the Blackfoot people, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Siksika, the Tsuut'ina, the Otipemisiwak Métis government, and every other Indigenous person who found their way here and calls this land their home. I feel very grateful to be sharing it with you all, even though we're not here together in person. So, what's ahead? Here's what you can expect me to cover today. And like Laura said, at the end of the presentation, if there are any questions, that's your opportunity to ask them, and I will do my best to answer those for you. But today we're going to be talking about why it's important to talk about sexuality with children and youth, what children and teens need to know that's age and stage appropriate. We're going to talk a bit about puberty, hygiene, and taking care of your body. We're going to talk about what's public, what's private. We're going to talk a bit about consent and boundaries, healthy relationships, including friendships, romantic relationships, all that good stuff. We're going to touch a little bit on media literacy. And then at the end, like I said, that's your opportunity to ask me any questions you may have. Full disclosure, whenever I'm doing an online session, I tend to zip through it very, very quickly. So there is a possibility that we'll be out of here before 8 tonight. This is something I do with every single group that I'm teaching, which is group promises. Because group promises, they help us all to be on the same page, have the same understanding of, what's expected in the learning space. So we're going to promise to listen to each other and take turns. I always say, you've been doing this since you were 4 years old. So when I'm talking, you're listening. When you're talking, I will definitely be listening to you. We're going to use kind words and no put downs today. It can take a lot of courage when we're talking about things like sexuality and bodies and puberty and all of those sexual health related topics. It can take a lot of courage to ask a question or to share a comment. So let's celebrate that instead of making someone feel bad for asking or sharing. Any question is okay. Let me tell you, I have heard every question under the sun, and nothing can faze me anymore. Some people feel like these sessions are their only chance to ask questions. And if that's you, please ask me anything. You can ask me in the chat. You can ask me with your voice after our session is done during the question period. Totally up to you. And then going off of that, it's okay to pass. If you would rather just sit back and listen, keep your camera off, that's all right with me. If you want to ask questions in the chat, if you want to jump in, that's all right with me too. I'm just glad that you're here. And then finally, privacy. If anyone decides to share a story or question, I want you to know that that is private. I am not going to blab about it in the office with my colleagues because that's none of my business to blab about. But I do want you to know that what I say, absolutely not private. You can share what I say with whomever you feel comfortable talking to about this stuff. If you have a family member where you think it would be useful for them to hear some of the information I've talked about, go ahead. You can share that with them. All right, so just some housekeeping on my end. Please stay on mute. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat. Though there is one or two slides where I might ask people to come off mute if they would like to answer a question, but I prefer you put them in the chat if I don't prompt you to go off mute. Oh, there we go. And if you have a question or a comment, put them in the chat. I don't know if you even have camera function available, but you can put it on, you can put it off. Like I said, I'm just glad that you're here. So, let's talk a little bit about why I use the term DA. DA, it stands for diverse abilities, and I use that just to be as inclusive as possible. My intention for using that is just to cover the broad spectrum of physical and cognitive, developmental, intellectual, and chronic conditions. Everyone is unique, and everyone will need that unique approach that works for them. By no means am I trying to police your language. I use DA, that doesn't mean you have to. If you use a different term at home with your family or in your professional work, that's good. That's good for you if it works for you. All disabilities are unique and individual, and this is just the term I use to describe all those unique and individual abilities. So, this is where one of the opportunities where you can come off mute, but I want us to think about our own roots when we talk about this. It helps us understand where we came from, where our children are at, or the folks that we work with, where they're at, and what they might need from us. So, my first question for you is, how did you learn about sexuality? So again, if you want to come off mute and say it out loud, go for it. If you want to put it in the chat, Laura, if you could share with me the chat responses, that would be great. One thing I do want to note is you might notice there might be some awkward silences or people just don't answer. And that's pretty typical with this topic, and that's okay. Part of my job is to leave space for people to think and process, maybe get the courage to ask a question. So I don't want you to let these awkward silences make you feel pressure to say something. We can just let them be there. Okay, I see at school. I love this Sue Johansson. Incredible. Sex with Dr. Sue. Really formative for lots of folks by the internet. Yeah, so there's lots of different ways that people are learning about sexuality. Some people may have learned at school, like we saw. Some people may have learned on the playground or from their friends at school. Some people might have talked with it about their family. Oh, I see another chat. Yep, school. Yeah, tons of different places. If you're me, you learn from Degrassi Junior High, which I feel very fortunate to have learned from those folks over at Degrassi Junior High. I have a second question for you. We've thought about how we have learned about sexuality, but how are our kids learning about sexuality today? Yeah, so school, TV, TikTok, totally. So media online, for lots of us, I wish they would use Sue Johansson. I wish so too. Because for lots of us, we didn't have technology or like we did have technology, but not the internet with so many different voices giving us information. But students now have access to the internet, right? So children learn mostly the same ways that we learned. They're still learning from family, they're still learning from friends, they're still learning from media like the radio, not so much the radio, but maybe podcasts or movies or TV. It's basically the same. Even when we think about the internet, not only are we still using the internet to learn ourselves, but the internet is just another type of media that can help people learn. It's good to keep in mind, though, that the information on the internet can be really, really good, but it is also not so good some of the time. Children, especially very, very young children, like infants and babies and toddlers, they learn from the way they're touched as they're growing up. Are they being held a lot? Are they getting those hugs and that attention? They're learning from affection. Children are learning from the words that their families use or don't use, right? They're watching those around them, their relationships. They're looking at the media, like the movies or YouTube videos they're watching. So essentially, we're all learning about this in the same way. It just might look a bit different since kids have the advent of TikTok and all this new technology. So I want you to think about this. Do youth with those diverse abilities learn differently from their typically developing peers? So youth might not have access to lots of different groups and perspectives. They might not attend sexuality education in school. Sometimes parents avoid talking with their children with diverse abilities about this because they believe their child might not be ready or will not date or have relationships. So we're seeing that kids with DA, teens with DA, they're being left out of these conversations. So let's talk about why we're teaching about sexuality. Children and youth who get to learn about bodies and relationships and sexuality have healthier friendships and relationships. They are ready to handle those puberty changes as they're getting older, and they're less vulnerable to abuse and sexual exploitation. So these are many good reasons to have these conversations with youth about sexuality and growing up because they take this information and the skills that they learn as they grow into adults and they're prepared for all these different changes that come with moving from child to teen to adult. So I have a cartoon up on the screen. If you can't see it, it is like a little baby ostrich looking at its ostrich parent whose head is buried deep in the ground. And little ostrich is saying, then I take it you'd rather not explain where little ostriches come from. And this cartoon reminds us all why this topic is important. If we hide from talking about this with our children, no matter what their ability, they'll learn that this topic is one that shouldn't be talked about. Maybe it's shameful or they'll think it's bad. So let's think about where could they get that info if they learn that they can't talk about it with their family. They might not be getting it from the most reliable sources, right? And, can we trust those sources that they do turn to? Can we trust what movies and books and the internet and TikTok and AI will tell them about what it will tell them about sexuality? So I've been saying this word a lot, sexuality, sexuality, but what is sexuality? Sexuality is an important part of the overall wellness of all people of all ages. Um, Lots of people, when they think of sex education, they tend to think of it as just learning about sex. But it's not just that. It includes gender roles and identities and sexual orientation. It includes body image, relationships, how bodies grow and change over the year from child to teen to adult to an older person. It's all about how bodies work, including reproduction. It's about someone's personality, how they communicate, how they express themselves, and their values and beliefs. So this means that learning about sexuality, it's a lifelong process. Sexuality changes over the lifespan. It doesn't just kick in during puberty. Everyone is sexual from birth to death. Everyone has relationships when they're very young, when they're very old. It's not just dating, it's not just sex. So the sexuality wheel, which you're seeing here on the PowerPoint, it shows how broad this concept of sexuality really is. Each spoke of the wheel represents one part of who we are, all connected and influenced by each other. The spokes on the left show who we are by nature, our personality, our gender identity, our sex assigned at birth, whereas the spokes on the right show who we're taught to be. So the kind of relationships we learn that we are deserving of, how we communicate, body image, what the media says about our body and how we feel about that. So when all the wheel's spokes are in good shape, that wheel moves freely and smoothly. When all of our self are healthy, our sexuality is healthy. But kind of the inverse of that is if one of these spokes are unhealthy, that wheel isn't able to move as freely or as smoothly. So let's talk about what do all youth need to know? All youth need to know the practical knowledge, like names for body parts and what's private versus what's public. And this is as soon as possible because this is a protective factor. Using accurate language for body parts helps everyone know what everyone is talking about. Kids also need to know where babies come from, puberty changes and hygiene, taking care of your body as you're going through puberty, and how to build positive relationships, be they friendships or romantic relationships. Understanding these basic body processes and processes for relationships, it helps people understand what's going on in them and around them. For example, puberty changes, they can be very surprising and they can feel like they come out of nowhere. This can be pretty freaky for a kid, so it's useful if we prepare them in advance and then when the time comes, we review it with them, right? So this could be managing periods. This could be learning about wet dreams and what to do if someone has a wet dream. Everyone has the right to make their own choices for their own body. So it's important to teach youth about setting boundaries, respecting boundaries, and protecting boundaries, if it's their own boundaries or other people's boundaries. So it's important because everyone has the right to have their boundaries respected. This includes ideas related to consent, right? So consent um, is basically asking for permission, waiting for an answer, and then respecting whatever answer the person gets. Okay? We should also be teaching about things like how to make healthy sexual decisions. So when we teach about that, when we teach about decision making, it's setting kids up for success. And you don't have to start with sexual decision making. You can start with giving them choices. What do you want to wear today? How about you decide what you wear today? What do you want for breakfast? What is a healthy option that you think we can have for breakfast as a family or alone? Let's talk a little bit about sexual behaviors. Like I said, people are sexual from birth to death, which means people show sexual behaviors. Some of them are expected based on the child's age and stage. Some of them are unexpected and need to be addressed in a special way. All sexual behaviors, depending on if they're happening in public or not, should be addressed anyways. Most behaviors, they don't last and they can be worked with, right? Um, so some of these expected behaviors they're developmentally age and stage appropriate, right? So I believe our website, ahs.ca/SRH, has a guide for age and stage developmentally sexual behaviors. If not, the Center for Sexuality's website, I know for sure that they have a breakdown of sexual behaviors by age and stage that are expected. Expected sexual behaviors, they're part of play, So if two kids are playing house and they say it's time to do the laundry, maybe they start taking off their clothes because they know when you do the laundry, you wash your clothes, right? So it's part of the play, but it's not the sole reason for the play. Expected sexual behaviors, they're about curiosity and discovery. Kids are curious. They want to know everything about the world, and sexual behaviors can be part of that. And also, sexual behaviors that are expected might be happening because they're pleasurable, right? They just feel good. And kids don't know that what they're doing is a private activity, that they can't be doing it right in the middle of school. Um, so it might just feel good. Whereas unexpected behaviors, they usually happen between kids who have an age difference, or a developmental difference. Unexpected sexual behaviors they're the main reason behind the play. So it's not just we're doing laundry, let's take our clothes off. It is like the sole reason that the play is happening. It continues even when they're being asked to stop and they're given the rationale and the reasons why that behavior is not okay. Unexpected behaviors, they might have force or bribery or threats or coercion or manipulation associated with the behavior. And of course, they put that child and or the other children at risk as well. So if you see a sexual behavior happening, always like you could talk to someone, right? If you're a parent, you can talk to the teacher if it's happening at school. You can have a consult with one of us at Sexual Reproductive Health, but you don't hide the problem because hiding the problem and not addressing it, that might tell the child that it's not something that is unexpected. What they're doing is fine. No one's telling them it's wrong, right? So some of these issues with touch that are unexpected, the ones that come to mind are like displays of affection, like kissing their friends, masturbating can be one. Um, Talking about things like menstruating or wet dreams or pornography. Those are unexpected, right? So what do you do when you encounter an unexpected behavior? You're going to teach like you're talking about anything else. And you can also access supports like your family doctor or support groups. I think the next slide here is going to give you a breakdown of how to address a sexual behavior. Yes, it does. Okay. Some sexual behaviors are signs of concern to contact a clinician or an other support because it might be an obsessive behavior. It might be happening between kids who are they have a different age, they have a difference in ages or developmental ability, or they might be causing harm to the children around them. So just because some sexual behaviors are developmentally appropriate doesn't mean that it's acceptable in all environments. Like, for example, if a child has their hands down their pants all the time, we know that that's not acceptable. That's when your hands are down your pants, that's for private. Can't just have your hands down your pants when you're on the bus or walking down the street. It's good to know, though, that for youth with those diverse abilities, the reason behind a lot of these sexual behaviors, it's often sensory, right? So when you're addressing a sexual behavior, use the same teaching or behavior modification technique that you use that works for any other behavior. When I'm teaching about this, I usually think about it like throwing chairs. If a child is throwing chairs in the room, teachers don't just let them throw chairs until it's out of their system, right? It's unsafe. So they're going to stop and they're going to address that behavior to make sure it stops. Same goes for sexual behaviors. There's nothing special about it. It can be addressed like any other. So here I have 5 steps for addressing sexual behaviors. You're going to identify the behavior using specific language. If someone just says, stop that, and the child is picking their nose and they have their hands down their pants and they had just thrown a ball at someone across the room, they're not going to know what stop that means or what it is that they need to stop, right? So using specific language. After that, you're going to normalize the behavior, right? Because that going to the shame shack, when someone feels bad about something they're doing, their brain might stop taking in the information for why they can't be doing it because it's full of that shame and embarrassment. But by normalizing, it's letting those walls stay down. After that, you're going to set limits. Then you're going to give a rationale or a reason why that kid cannot be doing that behavior. Then you're going to set a desired behavior or you're going to redirect. So here's an example. A child is touching their penis in public. This is the example I'll use. So and so, I see you're touching your penis right now. Touching your penis can feel good, normalizing the behavior, but you can't touch your private parts when you're in public, setting limits. Because touching your penis is a private activity that should only happen in a private space, like your bedroom or bathroom by yourself. So giving that rationale. Can you go wash your hands and we'll go do a puzzle? There, I'm redirecting. It's easy as that. So what's different for youth with diverse abilities? Parents and others often focus on behaviors and the physical parts of sexuality, like puberty. They ask, will my child go through puberty like they're typically developing peers or siblings? Yeah, for physical changes, unless they have a medical condition that delays puberty. But most likely their doctor will have identified that long before puberty should begin. The behaviors are more often obvious as they may not have the same filters as their typically developing peers. So youth with DA might be talking more about their periods to strangers or folks they might not know so well. They might be talking about, again, pornography or wet dreams, not understanding that, you need a filter with those things. That's not safe information to share in public. And they often need more support managing their physical changes than typically developing peers, or to figure out ways for how to manage those hygiene changes along with the special hygiene needs that they might have. But the big difference is that our youth, the youth with DA, need more support with that emotional and social learning, like social skills, negotiating in relationships or choices, decision making and assertiveness, following social rules, and coping with those feelings and emotions. So it's important as it is for children and teens to understand the physical changes of puberty, the real focus is those emotional and relationship changes. Okay? When we consider neurodiversity, along with the fact that some children may be sheltered due to a complex medical need, it's important to focus on growing up as more than starting periods, growing hair in funny places, and hygiene. It's important to talk about, your friends are going to become way more important, or you might be on that emotional roller coaster and feeling those mood swings. Just as important to set them up for those changes as it is for those physical changes. So, topics to teach and talk about. So, how to teach? You're going to plan ahead, right? So, let's say a kid is starting to approach puberty. Maybe you're going to add in some cues for augmented communication devices or for translators, right? And you're going to make sure that you're using clear language. Don't assume that all children will understand innuendo because it can be a bit confusing. Talking is teaching and modeling is teaching as well. Modeling is really important. You know, for lots of kids, their primary adults are like, oh man, that's their biggest idol. They want to be just like them. So by modeling things like asking for consent and modeling, what's a public behavior and oh, I need to go to the bathroom. I'm shutting the door because this is private. Modeling that shows kids what they should do and they can feel excited about it because again, their superstar, their idol is doing those things. They want to be just like them. Be concrete, accurate, honest, and consistent. If you don't know the answer to a question they have, you can say that. I don't know, but I'm going to get the answer for you. Use hands-on learning, problem solving, and role play. I have some resources for you that I'll show you at the end of this presentation that can help you out with that. Give it time and be prepared to teach and reteach. These are tricky concepts, especially for a kid who's just moving into puberty, who has never experienced this before. They may need some reteaching just to get those skills super concrete in their brain. And then teaching rules and boundaries is really important. Accept that to the kid, they might seem limiting, but let them know that we set boundaries because they are healthy and they keep us safe. Okay? Teach about puberty. So puberty is a life stage that occurs over a period of years and it might come in waves. Most people start puberty around 9 years old to 16 years old, but periods can start as early as 8 or 9. We've been seeing periods and puberty starting at younger and younger ages. So a reminder that puberty, it's not just those body changes. It's those social changes and those feelings changes as well. And that can be a struggle, regulating emotion, getting along with others, understanding the rules about friendships and dating. Puberty changes bring new challenges to all children and not just physical challenges. Hygiene is really, really, really important for health, like cleaning your teeth to prevent cavities and gum disease. But it's also healthy for social reasons because people like when we smell good and we feel better when we think we look good, right? So children and youth with those diverse abilities, they might need a bit of extra support with those hygiene rules and routines. So consider using something like a chore chart. I'm going to show you a resource at the end that has some of these chore charts for hygiene that you can print off and use in your home or with your clients. Okay. They might struggle to read social cues and knowing when to fix an hygiene issue, such as smelly breath. So they might also talk about private behaviors and not know what things are safe to talk about in private and what things are safe to talk about in public. We're going to talk about that in a few slides from now. But the most important thing is to celebrate development. When trusted adults respond to puberty positively, it can be really exciting. But when these trusted adults respond to it negatively, that kid can go into the shame shack, right? It can be really hard on a youth's well-being. So if a youth has a physical disability, they might need some extra help with personal care. Okay, so practice, 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 create a routine and keep that messaging about those hygiene routines consistent from parent to occupational therapist to teacher. And the more independent the child or teen can be, there's a lesser risk of sexual exploitation, though it's important to know that there are some people who will need help doing hygiene things their whole life, right? So that's where teaching about public versus private can be very, very protective. And then hygiene and taking care of yourself, learning those new skills, it takes time. So again, it's just that teaching and reteaching piece. So let's talk about teaching about privacy. Um, being aware of public and private is a way to prevent embarrassment and being in situations that could lead to abuse. So teaching about private body parts, those parts are the genitals or the parts that are covered by a bathing suit or underwear. They're also known as the swimsuit parts. And when I say that, I like to say that the chest on anybody, that's a private part, because no one should be touching anybody's chest. That's kind of strange. Three, touching or scratching private parts, adjusting private parts, touching private parts because it feels good. That's a private activity. That's gotta happen in a private place. And on top of that, no one can touch your body, your private parts, or any other part of your body without your permission or without a health care reason, like helping with bathing or visiting a doctor. And this is where the modeling and the teaching can come in the home is it's okay to say no if you don't want to give someone like a family member a hug or if you don't want a kiss from them. It's good to teach kids that they can say no or not right now to those things. It's important to teach about personal space. You know, you can't touch someone else's body without their permission, just like they can't touch your body without your permission. And no one can see your body naked without your permission. Just like how you can't look at someone else's private parts without their permission. People usually don't want to see a naked body, so don't show your naked body parts to people who don't want to see it. Or just in general, don't show those naked body parts. Those are just for you. And then help children and youth understand where are the private places where they can scratch your genitals or adjust or touch your genitals if it feels good. Those private places are at home, in the bedroom or bathroom alone, with the doors closed and the blinds shut. Okay, so those are the only two private places. Touching genitals, like I said, being naked, like changing or taking a bath, and sex, those are private behaviors, which means they gotta happen in those two private places. And finally, private versus public information. Not all information is public, right? So it's important to talk about what counts as that private information. And here is a handy dandy chart that I use to teach all this. So, of course, for public body parts, hands, legs, feet, but also noting that some cultures, some of these body parts, they are private still. It's just about what's okay for your family. And then private are parts of the body covered by the bathing suit. And I include the neck and the mouth just because the neck is so delicate. People shouldn't be touching the neck. And then no one should be putting things inside someone's mouth. That's not okay. That's a boundary break. Public spaces are public washrooms. The stall might feel private, but anyone can walk into that public washroom. A shared bedroom, the kitchen, or the living room at home. Whereas a private space, like I said, bathroom or bedroom at home alone with the doors closed and the blinds shut. Some public touches and behaviors that are okay are hugging safe people like a family member and touch for sports or games like tag or hockey, right? But some private activities and behaviors are using the washroom, changing your clothes to shower, or just changing in general, and touching the genitals for any reason. Public information could be things like weekend plans, your favorite animal, your favorite sports team. For some places like school, they're going to ask for someone's address and phone number, but that's only when the family gives permission. So it's important to teach that sometimes some places will need some private information, but they're going to talk to you about why they need it. And then private information is any private body information. So again, I'm thinking of things like having a period, pornography, wet dreams, masturbating. Information like passwords or PINs, and private family information. So this is a good conversation to have as a family so everyone understands what the boundaries are. Speaking of boundaries, let's talk about teaching boundaries. Boundaries are limits or rules that someone sets about what is okay and not okay for them. That helps keep people safe. A boundary that a lot of people can recognize is their personal bubble. People are the owner of their own body. They get to decide who can come in their personal bubble and when they're okay with people coming in their personal bubble. And boundaries, like I said, they help people stay safe and be responsible. It's important to model these healthy boundaries because, again, a kid might be looking up to you thinking you're the coolest thing in the world. And when you're modeling those, they're probably going to want to try making their own boundaries as well. And you can talk about boundaries in terms of people have their own boundaries, like, please don't come into my personal bubble. I don't want to hug right now. You can talk about it in terms of families have boundaries. Some families have rules about when it's okay and not okay to date. Like, you can't date until you're 16. And then whole societies have boundaries that we call the law. The law is in place to keep people safe. It's a boundary. And then with boundaries, you're going to teach about consent. Like I said, consent is asking for permission, waiting for an answer, and accepting whatever answer you get. Okay? Um, when we talk about consent, lots of people think about it in terms of sex. Because right now, lots of people, when they're talking about sex, they talk about consent. But we use consent every day. Like, can I borrow your pencil? Can I tuck the tag in on the back of your shirt? So you can teach consent through those non-sexual activities. Can I give you a hug? I see your shirt's kind of tucked up. Can I fix your shirt? Right? So you can model it and teach it through those actions. And then something else that's important is teaching and practicing how to say no, because it can be difficult, but also how to accept when someone says no to you, because that can also feel really, really difficult. And it's okay to that, like, it's normal that people feel bad or like they did something wrong if someone says no. You can normalize those feelings and come up with strategies to help move through those feelings, okay? All right. Now we're moving into the relationships, teaching about relationships. First, we're going to start off with friendships. Remember, we discussed how puberty and growing up is so much more than just those physical changes. The soft skills can be a challenge, and they're an important part of growing into an adult. These soft skills include learning to share, compromising, and setting boundaries. Healthy relationships, including friendships, can help youth to learn and practice these important skills, right? So, this includes learning that your caregivers and staff, your teachers, they're not your best friends. They're there to support you and to do their job. They're in a position of authority. So we like to say, in classrooms, lots of teachers are saying like, okay, friends, listen up. But that can be confusing, right? So making sure we're not creating a blurred boundary, that the youth know that you are not their friends if you are their teacher or their doctor, that you are there to help them and support them. And then, of course, it's important to learn coping skills for if a friendship ends, right? Or if you need to end a friendship, that can be difficult, and the youth might need a bit of support with ending that friendship. And then let's talk about dating and crushes. A lot of healthy relationships start off as healthy friendships. Okay? And during puberty, youth start to develop those crushes, those relationships. It's good to teach that just because someone has a crush doesn't mean that they need to act on those feelings. If they don't want to, it's okay to admire them from a distance. But if they do want to ask that person out on a date or to be dating partners or in a relationship, they might need some help and guidance on how that would go, how to say yes or no if they are being asked, and how to accept yes or no. It's really important to emphasize that dating is a choice. Some people do it, Some people don't. All those can be healthy. They get to make the best decision for them. So, talking about what your family values are and your beliefs, that can help a youth kind of figure out what they want and what they think would be best for them. Everyone deserves to learn about sexuality, which includes learning about healthy boundaries, ways to practice safer sex, like using condoms and birth control, and what's part of a healthy sexual relationship, which is a lot of the things that are part of healthy dating relationships and friendships as well. It's also good to learn how to end a relationship, be it sexual or friendship, like I said before. Not everyone wants to have a sexual relationship. Talking about your family values surrounding sex can build confidence in youth to decide what's best for them. Okay? So set rules about safety and boundaries, maybe a curfew, or you can't go into your room alone yet, or the door needs to be open. Teach about safer sex. If they're curious about it, make sure that they know about the options to lower the risk of sex. Relationships should be healthy, build confidence and self-esteem. Healthy relationships make us healthier. Unhealthy relationships can make us sicker. It's good to teach what those cues are for healthy and unhealthy relationship and support the youth in ending a relationship if that's the way they want to go. So, digital media, whether we like it or not, it's here for good. So even when youth have a significant intellectual disability, digital media is probably being used by them in some way, shape, or form. Okay? Digital media is one of the main forms of connection and communication for youth today, and schools are largely relying on digital media for things like homework and handing things in. Okay? So parents can't always be around when their youth is using digital media. It's a good idea to talk about media literacy with youth. Important things to talk about include the way that media doesn't always show real life, right? Like the bodies that are promoted in media, types of relationships or sex that we see in media, they may not reflect what's real, right? So talking about ways to figure out those messages that media is pushing. Because all media has a goal, which can sometimes make us feel really bad. So it's important to be intentional about how we use digital media. And then on top of digital media, we got to talk about social media because social media is everywhere. It can be fun, it can be useful, but it also carries some risks. Even if a child that you work with or your own child doesn't have their own device, they might still see their sibling or their friend using social media on their phone. And they're watching you on your phone. So, modeling healthy habits with social media and opening discussions about media literacy and how to use social media can build those healthy habits. So it's good to teach about digital limits. Do regular check-ins. What apps do you like using? What websites are you using? Oh, Roblox? Okay, tell me about Roblox. What's that all about? And then setting limits about what personal information is and what should and should not be shared, like real names, addresses, gaming tags or IDs with folks that the youth might not know. It's important to set limits about, we don't meet the people, like we don't meet our friends online in person. Those online friends just stay online. You can set screen time limits and um locations, I get like don't share your location. Make sure to limit that. And then talk about the different platforms. Why people use Instagram. What kinds of things do you see on Instagram? Same goes for gaming and games. And then you should teach about pornography. It's important to recognize that many youth, including youth with diverse abilities, regularly access porn, whether we know it or not. So it's good to set boundaries. It's actually very important to set boundaries with pornography. Absolutely, no public use under any circumstances. Pornography is a private behavior that happens in the private spaces, the bedroom or bathroom at home, alone, with the doors closed and the blinds shut. So, I'm going to talk a bit about porn literacy, which is like media literacy. People are able to distinguish what's real, what's fake, and what messages are being pushed, in this case through pornography. So, here's what we know for sure. Porn literacy helps people make healthy choices for themselves, their relationships, and what media they use. People with poor porn literacy are more likely to have problems related to porn and sexually explicit media. If you find that a youth you're working with or your own child is using porn, don't ignore it. Support if they've seen something that they're uncomfortable about. Let them know that you're a safe person to talk with about this, that you're not going to shut the conversation down or cause any shame. And if pornography becomes a problem, like the youth is watching it all the time or showing other people pornography, you can get support from a doctor or a teacher, or you can reach out to someone at the ed team with sexual and reproductive health, and we can offer consultation with that. Okay, I believe this is my last video. So yeah, that's Amaze. Love Amaze. Amaze.org has tons of fantastic videos for youth. It's an excellent resource. So I only have a couple slides left for you, which are my resources that I have to offer. Task.ca, TASCC.ca, is a website that was created for youth with disabilities and for folks supporting youth with disabilities to learn about sexuality. That includes, again, puberty, changes, sex, relationships, how someone feels about themselves, taking care of their body, everything on that sexuality wheel, you will find information about on task.ca. It also has a course available with, I think, 5 modules that teaches more in depth about lots of important topics related to sexuality. Youth can do it by themselves. They can do the courses with a support person present, so they can chat with that person as they're going through the courses. Able to Learn. This is a website that has social stories. Social stories are an excellent tool for youth with disabilities. And this website has lots of great social stories related to public versus private behaviors. When can I touch myself? When can I masturbate? It prepares them for puberty. You can see this one right here. I have my period, which is all about teaching those basic skills for taking care of your body while you're on your period. The social stories range from $0 to $5. And I've used a few of them in the classroom. I think they're excellent. And then this resource is very fun. It's planetpuberty.org.au, and it's an Australian website that has games and activities and resources related to all things puberty and bodies. Consent, public versus private, body changes. It is a lot of fun. So here are the takeaways. Everyone has the right to comprehensive sexuality education, no matter what their ability. Okay? So learning about sexuality is important to their well-being, both for their sexual development and their development as a person in the world. Teach about sexuality just like you would teach about anything else, like tying your shoe. Making it seem like it's something weird or extraordinary lets a child or youth know that, okay, this is something that is not normal. This is something special and different. But by teaching it like you would teach anything else, it just becomes a normal part of the world. And then use those teachable moments to develop skills. Model the behaviors you want to see. Use moments like when you're watching TV to talk about relationships or body image or puberty changes or private versus public. All right. Does anybody have any questions?